The competitive 40K network presents Art of War. Art of War. Strategy and tactics. Discussions with the best players on the planet. Now your host, Nick Nanavati.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Art of War podcast. I'm your host, Nick Nanavati, and this week we are joined by a very special guest all the way from Germany, Niklas Fritschen. Niklas, how you doing?
Hi, Nick. I'm doing wonderful. So happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. Niklas is doing superbly well out there in the Warhammer competitive scene. He's just off a first place super major victory at the Raccoon Rumble in Germany. Then he flew the next week over to the World Championships of Warhammer. We actually played in the first round, and he finished with a record of 6 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw there as well, with demons of all factions, Chaos Demons. I love this faction. You're going to feel that through this podcast episode. But also, it has been so long since we've seen Demons doing well on the competitive scene at this level, and I am so excited to talk to Niklas about how his list works, how he is as a player, and how it all happens. And perhaps the most important, impressive thing of this entire episode, Niklas has only been playing Warhammer for 1 year. So we're going to get to go into Niklas, how this is possible, how it all works, and then in part 2 of this episode, available for our patrons, you can subscribe right now on AOW40k.com. That's where we're going to interview Niklas on his games played at WCW, really follow up with the tactics, the strategy, the actual moves he made on the table. So if you're interested in learning Warhammer and getting better at this game, definitely subscribe. You'll get access to this part 2, 260 other episodes, and our amazing Discord server where you can interact with me and Niklas directly. Niklas, are you ready?
I'm so ready and so hyped.
I'm so ready and so hyped. This is going to be such a fun episode. Can you tell me about how you got into Warhammer?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you alluded to in the intro, joined quite recently. Specifically 2 years ago, I was just finished with my master's in the UK, and I came back to Germany, and I broke up with my girlfriend, moved in with a friend of mine, and we both said, hey, this Warhammer thing, we're kind of interested in it. Why not start it? And so we started playing on TTS, noticed this is a really fun game. Let's get the models, started painting all that up, and just started going to our local tournaments. And we just noticed, well, we're kind of winning in our online games. Okay, let's go to a tournament. Well, we're winning at these local one-day tournaments. Maybe we should go to a GT. And kind of kept winning lots of games, which kept drawing us more in, and we got really, really into it. And so together with my best friend there, we kept playing, started a team, and are now doing a pretty intense year of playing Warhammer as much as we can.
That's pretty amazing. Wow. I mean, let's just break this down. So you just started playing on TTS first, which is actually a unique approach to getting into Warhammer. Maybe it's getting more and more common these days as we move into 2025. But traditionally, you'd go to a store, look at the models, be like, that was really cool, not know what you're doing, probably as a kid, kind of get into the game that way. And then through years and years and years, get better. You took a totally different approach. What drew you to the game in the first place? How did you even find out about it?
Well, I guess that is what you described, because when I was a kid, we had one mall in my city, and next to the GameStop where were video games, there was a store that had Warhammer. But back at that time, I had no idea what it was. I just knew that whenever I went to pick up the new Pokemon games, there were guys moving models, and it looked kind of cool, but I never really, it was like, wow, that's really awesome. Maybe I'll do that someday, but never looked into it more. Someday the store disappeared, but I kept it in my mind. And I knew about Warhammer just because I'm a big nerd and I play lots of games. I'm online all the time. So, this is the niche where those things also reach you. So I was always aware of it. And then through content creators on YouTube, kind of picked up the topic again, saw more and more of it. And when I spoke with my buddy with it, he was like, yeah, you know what? I'm also interested. Let's dive into it. And that's how we got into it. And to be honest, when we first started at looking at the gameplay, we were watching Art of War. So gotta be honest, you guys kind of drew us into it, because we watched the gameplay and we thought, that looks super fun. That looks super interesting. We want to play. We want to really play the gameplay, not just the collecting aspect, but we just loved the strategic game of it. And that's the main motivator for us, I think.
Wow, that's such an amazing story that warms my heart, right? Like, especially the full circle of it. Like, you didn't really play Warhammer except for when you were like a kid. You saw it, picked it up as an adult, saw our channel, which thank you, and then that kind of inspired you to get into it. This is literally, the thing that keeps me awake at night. Like it's so exciting in a good way, and to then get the experience of playing you, and you're playing demons, and now you're on the show that you listen to getting interviewed. It's very cyclical in a really cool way. We definitely vibed in our game, and I'm very excited to talk about it. But you're doing something that's super duper impressive, right? Like at a core level, you picked up a hobby, which I have no idea how many people actually play this game, but I'm going to guess millions of people play Warhammer. And within 1 year, from playing online to going to tournaments, you won a super major, got invited to the World Championships Warhammer, and frankly performed better than many professionals at that. What is that? How does that happen? What is your practice routine? What is the way you look at the game? How do you actually get these kinds of results? Especially, we're not even going to talk about the demon portion of this, but just as a player, like this is impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it couldn't have been done without my team, to be honest. So my buddy and me, we very quickly created a team after playing online, Zugzwang, hard to pronounce, terrible name for not German speakers. And we based it out with the mindset of we want to make competitive players to play like tournaments. We started online. And it's really just this constant being together, talking like every day online, playing against each other every day, and just having this. Every single day we talk about Warhammer, and we try to get better at Warhammer, and we practice with it and play online. A lot of TTS games, that is the main component there. And by having this bubble and this team and pushing each other, giving feedback all the time, we could all learn so much because all of the people in our team, we are all new to Warhammer. We were all just starting out recently and having this super motivation to improve. So it's really this environment of like-minded people who all want to achieve something great here that kind of pushed us. And the other people on our team had very, very similar results. In fact, one of my team members, Tim Schneider, he made the top cut. He's rank 1 German player, he plays Wotan, which he's surprising the world with. My other teammate who I started out with, he's coach of Team Germany for the next year. So this team that we're making, all the people who are taking part of it are becoming something more than they could be on their own. And I have to attribute like all of this rapid success to that, I think.
What team is it? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a Zugzwang. So it's from a chess term, like Zugzwang.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
How do you spell it? I'll look it up.
It's a Zugzwang.
One more time? I'm going to edit this out. Let me just make a note.
Yes. Wait, I can put it here. So it's Zugzwang. It's a Roman chess term where when your opponent is not,
to move.
Yeah, exactly. Your opponent is not under checkmate, right?
Yeah.
But every single move they make, you lose them in the game, which is kind of a thing. Yeah. Fun.
That's a really cool idea.
Fun trivia. When me and my friend Pulo, who we started the team, when we went to our first local tournaments, we signed up with a different name. And that name was Art of Losing.
Really?
Yes.
Was that like as a play on Art of War, or was that?
Yeah,
just,
exactly.
Okay.
It was a play of Art of War. We went to our first local, actually 2v2 tournament. And if you look at the list of participants there, you will see my name with a team of Art of Losing. Yeah.
That's
we won that. So
That's awesome. So let me try to dig a little deeper into this. Your surrounded yourself with obviously some great Warhammer players. You're the number one ranked Votan player, the coach of Team Germany. Your team is on fire, and you're crushing it and learning, and you're all pushing each other to get better. This is a great way to get better at anything. And a lot of people, even in the podcast, have their core group of players that they they're getting games with and pushing each other. But I would say the rate that you're succeeding is kind of incredible, and that's got to come from either your crazy ability to think about Warhammer, or just like specifically viewing it in a certain way that is different to how other people's view it. And through watching you play your demons, it was kind of apparent that was the case. How do you actually like view Warhammer, if you can try to answer that question? And like, how do you view getting better at it? What are the things you focus on as a player?
Right, that's a good question, but it's also difficult question, I suppose. We started playing online with Tabletop Simulator, and that is where we play all of our games. So I have not played a single game that isn't a tournament that is IRL. Like I don't have.
Really? Like you wouldn't go to someone's house to like practice, or a store to practice? That's not a thing.
Yeah, because we're super spread out kind of across Germany and places. And so we play, this gets you on from the beginning, teaches you to be very precise in your gameplay, because you have exact measurements and exact auras, and all your rules are right there on the screen with you, right? So from the very beginning, you become very technical in that, and you can
It teaches you to play a very precise game of Warhammer.
And so that's what it becomes. It becomes like this precision game where you need to control like movement really exactly, and you need to control angles really exactly. And it's very difficult to make rules mistakes because you have all the data sheets right there on the screen for you. And so you take this super strategic approach and try to really there's no luck kind of involved, or there's no rolling a 4+ if the model is on the mark or not, or stuff like that. You just get really technical with it.
Yeah, and I think you've learned the micro 40K very, very well by playing TTS properly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a foundation. And then from the gameplay approach, the way I like to play my games is always kind of like a puzzle of finding the kind of the path to victory, which feeds very well onto why I play demons, because I like always to have this, okay, here's the next battle round. What do I do here? How can I use a mistake? How can I position the optimal way? It's like a puzzle always to tackle. And every game is new, and every battle round is new. And every time I activate a unit, this has new information to me. So I keep constantly changing my plan, depending on how the game goes. I do very little preparation for individual battles or like rounds, which is something that lots of other online players do a lot. It's not my style, because I like to always be flexible and use that to always have the best plan, no matter what unexpected thing happens, kind of.
Let's unpack that a little, because I think that's really fascinating. You basically say you don't have a playbook of go-to strategies. Is that a good way to phrase it? Instead, you just play the moment of Warhammer. Really, like every game is a unique snowflake, and you're trying to navigate that specific game the best you can. That is an overwhelming amount of thought, right? A lot of Warhammer and like anything is getting good at shortcuts so that you can put your mental load on the execution, maybe, instead of the figuring out what to do. How do you break that down, and why do you find that advantageous for yourself?
Well, obviously I see a lot of strength in having a kind of standard approach, or knowing, okay, this is this matchup, so I will deploy like that, or I know this is the map, so I need to get there so my unit can go here. All these kind of routines. I see the strength in that, since it really allows you to always have a good solid game plan, right? But for me, I can only always control half of the game, which is my stuff, and I can never control what an opponent does, right? Like, you can have the same matchup, the exact same list, but if your opponent pilots it very differently, then your game plan has to change accordingly, right?
Right.
And so for me, I always think it's not possible to have full control over how the game goes, especially since we have a dice game, right? There's mistakes every time. So if from the beginning, my opinion is be flexible and adapt to anything that happens, then I can never be surprised by something, and I get into the habit of playing that way. And I still obviously have standard deployment plans or standard kind of gameplay loops that I do, right? But I try not to rely on them too much and always consider everything else. And yeah, during the game, that takes time. As you surely noticed during our game, I'm slow, very slow. But the rewards can be worth it.
Well,
especially when you play.
I will say, just a tangent on our game a little bit about that speed thing. GW or WCW was a not clock enforced environment. It was clock encouraged. If you both wanted to play on a clock, you could. And then you rolled up with the clock, knowing full well that you're slow, kind of embracing it. And I was like, sure, let's play on a clock. And you used your time and you were mindful of it. And it was kind of easy with 2 hours. But do you find that the time is a challenge for you to navigate when it's like an hour and a half round time for yourself? Or do you just, you make it work?
Well, I make it work, but it's a challenge. Yes, for me, I have clocked frequently in the past.
Oh, really?
I've lost tournament games because of clocking and all that, and it became a really important skill for me to practice not to clock.
That's so fascinating.
Oh yeah,
because you're also playing Demons. We'll get into your list in a little while, but you don't have any models.
Yeah. Oh, I clock whatever I play. It doesn't matter what army I play. I play CSM, Death Guard, Demons. I get time issues. It's just part of my gameplay because I think so long and I measure precisely, and I stand there with my head in my hand going do I right? So that comes with the pause. But I think the time you have is a real resource, and I think when you play too fast, you're probably not thinking enough about the options and all the possibilities. And so I think that's a waste of that resource. But also, if you think too much and you don't have enough time, that's obviously also a misuse of the resource. For me personally, I always play with clock, which is also the standard, of course, for most tournaments here in Germany, right? And globally.
Yeah.
And I really hate it when I run into the clock, not because, oh, damn it, I lose, but because it puts a ton of stress on the opponent. It becomes very uncomfortable for them, right? Because then becomes the question, maybe they want to offer me more time, right? Or maybe they feel bad because they don't offer time. And if it's 5 minutes and I need to still move 20 models, you're going to move the models less accurately or less cleanly, right? So there could be mistakes, whatever. It becomes a heated, stressful environment. So clocking really sucks for the opponent. So it's always my goal not to clock. But I haven't clocked in a long time. Let me say that.
That's good. There you go.
But I plan my games to have 3 minutes at the end of the game, basically. I use my time.
Interesting. So even when there's a simple board state, you'll just still think it all through.
Yeah, I try to. Of course, if there's really nothing to do,
sure,
play fast because I need to save my time for the complicated board states, right? But yeah, no.
That is just a fascinating thing. I mean, it makes sense. Time is a resource. You want to maximize it. I have a kind of different approach with time in Warhammer. I'm a fast player traditionally compared to other top players. I kind of attribute this to the fact that I've been playing for 20 years. Not to say I couldn't benefit from slowing down. I think we all could, but it just kind of comes naturally to me at this point, right? So a lot of Warhammer is intuitive in a weird way. And I would rather just not stress about time. I like when I have more time than my opponent. I like when I have 30 minutes on the clock with turn 4 starting. I like not having to look at the clock and be mindful, so that when I do have a important turn, I don't mind taking 20 minutes on a command phase if it's an important command phase, but I don't want to do it for every command phase, if you know what I mean.
I totally feel you, and I definitely want to get there where I can use my time better, because I also want to be there where I'm okay, 30 minutes for the last 2 turns, relax and chill. But then I always find myself, okay, turn 1. Well, this is an important turn, right? And then I start.
Right. No, it's so true. It's so true. I think I could benefit from maybe spending a little bit more time on turn 1 specifically. I kind of breeze through turn 1 a lot of the times because I just like hide. But anyway, Niklas, one of the challenging things about Warhammer is obviously how do you get better at it, right? Which is a big focus of my Art of War and all of our teachings. There are so many avenues to reflect upon, like your army list, your specific movements. Obviously, people blame dice, but dice are certainly a factor. How do you play around that, and etc. What is your process for evaluating your own mistakes, especially when you spend so many time hemming and hawing the decisions?
Right. It's always easy to blame the dice, and it's always fun to blame dice. And I certainly always go after each game I lose. I go to my friends and I say, "Man, you should have seen that. Lord of Change did 0 damage to this," or "I failed the 5-up Battle Shock on Shalaxi, so I couldn't pick her up and kill Nick's tanks in the middle," right? But then every time you do that, you have to look at, okay, but also what mistakes did I make that were in my control? So it's like, well, I could have put my scoring unit 2-inch closer to that corner, so I could have done 2 points for engage in that turn. And I could have done this move block here a little bit cleaner, so that he had a 7-inch charge instead of a 6-inch charge, and he would have failed. I could have positioned my unit in a way where one less model of the opponent could have shot. Maybe that would have been the last save that makes a difference between dying or living, right? So every time I look at it and I think, well, I could have made this play 5% more consistent if I had done this. And then maybe it would have been enough, right?
Interesting.
That's what
So
I tried to
it's
say.
very like micro based for decision making at that point. We're like just the execution of this play. Let's do it a little bit better. Let's think of it from a different angle. Not so much like this play as a whole was the wrong approach to the situation.
I mean, of course, that also is there a lot, but I guess at this point I have so much practice with this list, especially that I feel like my macro is oftentimes not the issue, and I feel like oftentimes many decisions can be correct. You just need to do them right. It's like
Interesting.
the same
Yeah.
philosophy that you have kind of with if you have a team game, for example, it's like, well, the leader makes a decision and you just do the decision and you do that decision as best as you can. And doesn't matter if it's maybe not the most optimal, but you did it, I guess.
Yeah.
Of course, if you just make actual mistakes, like big macro mistakes, that is not applicable. Many options are kind of in a similar vein. And I still, of course, make mistakes there and I reflect on that. But it's
I think
harder to
it's a
learn
very
that.
interesting take you got there. A lot of times people, when they're reflecting upon Warhammer, try to think of that big picture. What if I was defensive this turn instead of coming out that turn, or what if I deployed in a different way? And that's super important, especially for like newer players and people who don't have that macro strategy kind of down. But I think the micro level execution is something that is so easy to overlook. And because it is, once you decide I'm going to move my unit and then charge your unit, that feels like it's the decision time level in 40K, right? It's on that level of scale. But within that, there's like, how does every model move? How does every model pile in? Where do they end up after they consolidate? How do they allocate their attacks? What about heroic intervention, interrupt, this, that, whatever. And I think a lot of that gets simplified down, and the art of the skill in there is not fully explored. I know we teach it in the War Room and things like that, which is a great place to learn it. But it's definitely like not a common answer when I ask this question every week on the show.
Well, happy to bring a slightly different take then, I guess.
I love it.
No, I fully agree. It's just because I know that I still have, like, the sky is the limit in terms of that. Because every single turn, every single game, I'm like, okay, if I move during this charge phase, this one model, half an inch more to the left, so I can then consolidate 1 more inch in this direction, then this enemy model wouldn't have been able to shoot this, right? Like, because maybe the engagement range makes it so that then you're 0.2 inches too short of getting there. Or like I try to move block this model here, but actually I lost 2 models in Overwatch. So now this model leaves barely enough space for him. But if I had moved that a little bit better, I could have lost 2 models without losing the move block, right? Like these tiny micro things that happen dozens of times every single game on both sides, right? If you really make all of them correct in a game, like you are probably a super genius. I think it's impossible to achieve that level, right? But it's something I know lots of my teammates strive towards, to make that as clean as possible, because in the end, all of these things add up, right? Like all of these things are maybe 5% less damage taken or 10% more points or something like that. And in a dice game that goes over 3 hours where we roll hundreds of dice, this is a really significant difference in the end.
It clearly is. I mean, your results speak for themselves. I think it's, like I said, it's so easy to overlook the value of this, but it is such an important lesson to learn. But let's talk about your list and how you actually play it as well. So can you just walk me through the Daemon list that you took to Worlds and Raccoon Rumble?
Absolutely. I'm very proud of this because it's all self-made, and I know I was the very first to play these lists. So love to be able to share this with everyone nowadays. So I got 4 big demons in the demon list, starting with Bellacore as the warlord, then the 2 Zinj birds, a lot of change with the Everstave enhancement to give him more range and strength, as well as the named character Kairos Fate Weaver himself. Then my last big demon is Shalaxi Hellbane, the named Slanesh keeper. My 5th character is the Changeling, the little lone up from Zinj. And then for battle line, I have 1 unit of Pink Horrors, 1 unit of Plague Bearers, and 3 Nurglings. And then the list is filled out with 3 units of 3 Screamers and 1 5-man squad of Seekers. And Seekers are the Slanesh cavalry, and Screamers are the Zinj Manta race, basically.
Yeah. So I love demons, and I'm fascinated by your list. I think it's actually very good.
If you are listening to this, it probably means you play Warhammer 40k. And if you're playing Warhammer, you know you need a lot of dice. Baron of Dice is where we get our dice from. They produce amazing different kinds of dice. We just recently got all kinds of different faction dice shipped to us, which we use on our stream games. But not only do they look really cool, but they're highly customizable. You can get different symbols, corners that are square, corners that are round, different shapes and sizes, different sided dice. It's all the rage. And they're customizable in color and design as well. They are so cool looking. Not only that, but they feel great to roll in your hands. I've never held dice that roll and feel this good. Not only that, but they are scientifically perfectly balanced. There are tons of case studies on people rolling thousands of dice and recording all the results that they get. And sometimes you might get a die that rolls just a few too many ones. We've all had to throw it out before. These dice are not like that. They are perfectly balanced to a T, thousands of rolls, perfect distribution. If you want to take your Warhammer game seriously and make sure the dice are not screwing you over, get some Baron of Dice.
I'm so thrilled that I got the chance to play you, but I want to hear from your words, Niklas. What is the strategy behind your list? I know it's malleable game to game, of course, especially with this demon art, but how would you try to boil it down?
Me hit you, you don't hit me. That's
that's the 101 too. That's such a relative. So how does that actually work on a tactical level?
Right.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, I guess the core loop, right, is you have these 2 shooting pieces, a lot of Trench and Kairos. They are both okay. They don't shoot that great. But I am able to shoot my opponent without my opponent shooting me back because I have Bellacore, who gives me 18-inch lone up, right? And so that's the main part, right? I shoot you and I make it so that your big guns cannot shoot me back. Of course, that isn't as easy just like that, because 18 inches is a big range and fast gun good, right? Look at Tau, look at Sisters, look at Astra, whatever, all that stuff. So I need to stop you from moving within 18. So I have lots of very fast units like Screamers who move 14 and Seekers who have 9-inch scout and 14 move to block off angles or move block you or tag the shooting pieces in melee. I have 3-inch deep strikes with big conga lines of horrors or plague bearers to stop you from advancing up the board. And this is how I get to ensure that my 18-inch loner bubble gets used optimally and I get to shoot you without getting shot back. And then in terms of melee, well, I have Shalaxi Hellbane, the single most damaging unit demons have, which basically says if you try to just rush me down, Shalaxi will just come in and destroy anything you put in front of her as the big counter punch, right? And then obviously as demons, we are really good at playing the mission. So we get secondary points very well. And we're really good at denying primary because I have these 2 units with 20 OC that I can 3-inch deep strike and I can charge from deep strike on to battlefield to keep everything intact up, keep all the primary locked down, and just kind of slowly whittle my opponent down. Yeah.
I love it. That's actually a very, very great description of it all. So it kind of hinges upon the Bellacore 18-inch lone opera applying to your birds as they fly around the table, and you pick off portions of the enemy, shoot them, don't get shot back, and then you're move blocking with seekers or screamers or whatever makes sense to move block in that moment. And your demons, so you have access to things like 3-inch deep strike and just better deep strikes in general, up and down. So your secondary game is like pretty solid. And then you've got plague bears and horrors to like hold primary objectives, sticky objectives. You've got a lot of ways to influence the game beyond that point, essentially. So one of the big challenges of demons is that they are not great in the stats department. Like for a big monster, you would expect a lot more damage and a lot more durability out of these profiles. Like the fact that you can shoot in both Lord Change and Fate Weaver at a Rhino that pops smoke and it might still be there is kind of embarrassing. How do you navigate the stat problem?
Right. That's right on the money, Nick. The issue is that demon data sheets kind of, right, they suck a little bit, like they don't really pull their weight. So what you need to do is you really need to get every bit of usage out of every unit you have. I think the best example for that is always Kairos. Kairos has decent toughness, 20 wounds, toughness 10 for invuln, but nothing special for his points. Kairos has a horrible gun force points, like 6 plus D3, 9-3 damage D3. That sucks, right? For 270 points, you want a better gun. His melee sucks even harder, right? 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, like, does nothing. So his toughness isn't great, his shooting isn't great, his melee isn't great. Okay. Then he has one rule is that he gets me CP back, but only if I target something within 6 that is Zinj and I roll higher than the battle rounds. That kind of sucks. The only rule that he has that's really good is Vect, 12-inch aura Vect, right? But is that 270 points good? Maybe not, right? But I think Kairos is a fantastic unit, and I would never leave home without him. Because if you use all of these components of a status sheet all together, plus the fact that he can 6-inch drop the lot of change, plus that he can get pink horrors where they need to go, plus that he's 5 OC, right? If you combine everything together on a data sheet, that's when he's good. You need to use that CP he generates. You need to use the vector or to protect your important things or to stop your opponent from popping smoke and armor of contempt on that rhino you want to kill. You need to use his melee to finish off the last surviving screening unit. You need to use his shooting optimally to support a lot of change or to kill some scoring units by war, right? If you use everything in a data sheet to his maximum potential, then he's worth his points. If you don't do it, he's kind of not great, right? And this goes with basically every unit. Like if you don't shoot with Shalaxi, you're wasting so much of her points because her gun is kind of okay. If you use the Changeling only for scoring, he sucks. But if you use him for scoring and shooting and threatening to turn off shooting and charging a unit on the marker so that they take a battle shock test and they lose their OC, right? You need to really, whenever you activate a unit, you need to think, how can I get 100% out of the data sheet? Because they are not strong in a vacuum.
Makes a lot of sense. I love that answer too. It goes back to the tactical way you look at the game at a strategic level. I mean, basically instead the micro movement of a big bird is how do I get all of the different things that this bird can offer me? How do I essentially use its CP regeneration, use its vector, use its indirect fire, use its OC, all in conjunction, use the size of its base, to really maximize the value of this unit. And if you do that across your army, you kind of get value despite the stats not being there. But at that core level, Warhammer does involve like killing the opponent, right? Like as a means to prevent them from scoring points or whatever. You have a great way to like chip away at the edges, do some damage without getting damage back to you. But what if your opponent just drives to the objectives and like scores points, the old-fashioned way, and you just can't dislodge them? Or do you have enough power to dislodge them in those cases?
Right, good question, and that's definitely one of the main challenges. For some context, I've been running this iteration of the list for around 2 months now. Before that, I ran a version where I didn't have Shalaxi. I had a Keeper of Secrets and like some Demonettes and the Mask, so like more tricky stuff, more kind of shenanigans, right? And I had decent success with it. I won my golden ticket with that list, but to be honest, the meta became more and more just, here are my land forts that are driving on markers. Here are my 6 Lehman Russes and all that, right? All that stuff. And it was like, I'm starting to really lose the games where my opponent just gets turn 1, drives forwards and says, hello, here I am.
Yeah, no, that's like such a demon problem, right?
Yeah. But with this list, obviously Shalaxi is this big unit that takes care of one problem, right? That's helpful. And if you combine everything together, right? If you have Shalaxi, Kairos, and Blood Chain shooting at one thing that is in the vector aura, so they can't use 2 defensive stratagems, right? And then Be'lakor maybe also goes in. You can usually kill 2 big things per turn. And then you can, maybe your opponent thought, well, I'm going to push on all sides of the board, right? I'm going to push all table areas, right? Okay, well, I'm going to pick one table area where I'm going to kill these 2 things, and I will stop the other areas from the table from moving closer to me for 1 turn, right? Maybe I sacrifice primary for 1 turn while I just move block half of the board and take care of the other half, or try to take care, right?
Makes sense,
so that's how you try to deal with that. But in full transparency, right? If I play against like 2 land forts with 20 berserkers, I struggle. Right. It is what it is, right? Right? Every list has some, of course, rough matchups, and definitely those types of lists are the hardest to deal with. But it's not impossible, because sure, your opponent can just push forwards, but the more aggressive your opponent is, the easier it is for them to make a mistake. To make a mistake in their screening, or to make a mistake in their game plan of what do I have to prioritize, what do I have to protect more. Right? Because if they just sit back and they just send their little scoring units out every turn, they can take their time and do everything perfectly, and you will not have an opening, kind of. But they usually have to take some risk when they push. And that's something you can really use as demons, right? We are great at abusing mistakes of the opponent.
Yeah, I think
because we can always react.
Super. Right. And you're basically just kind of floating around the edges, shooting what you can, scoring the points you can, and waiting for an opportunity to arise, right? And that's really the reactionary style is one that lends itself to your approach of playing every game like it's an individual match, not to be repeated ever again. And I'm so excited to talking to you about part 2 when we actually dive into all of your games and how you approached all these different unique situations. But I have a few more questions while we're here. You're not that high on the model count or the OC count, right? You got 4 big monsters, 5 OC each. That's OC 20 for 1,200 points or something. And then you've got 2 units of 10 dudes, Horrors and Plague Bearers. That's another 20 OC each, not bad. But your army is like capping out at like 60 OC and then some Screamers and whatever. And if your Screamers are secondary scoring and move blocking, they're not really contributing much to the objectives. How do you actually hold primary and keep primary under your control during the games, especially in light of your opponents having just more stuff than you do?
Yeah. So the thing is, sure, my total amount of OC is not that much, but I always have the OC I need where I need it, right? I don't have to split my army with like half my OC on this table half and the other on this table half, right? And then some have to be at home. No, I can just say, okay, my opponent has this much OC in this table quarter. Okay, I need to kill this much, and then I can drop 10 plague bearers plus horrors and put a big bird on here. I hold this now, right? I can always move my OC, and my OC is a really valuable resource, right? Like I throw away screamers and seekers like they are, cheap bread that I just throw out. They just die in the first 2 turns oftentimes. But plague birds and pink horrors, they need to be there to hold that OC or to steal OC for 1 turn from the opponents. That's really important. And I prioritize in all of my games killing the opponent's scoring. I always think, okay, there's, let's say, a 10-man Katashan unit, right? 20 OC or 30 if they use the stratagem, right? That's my priority. I need to stop those guys from reaching me. I don't care about the tanks that much or the big damage dealers that much, right? I'm always going for what parts of what units in my opponent's list are critical for them to play the mission, for them to play the primary, and to score the secondaries. And I try to take them out first, so that then I don't have to worry about it. And as demons, we have the tools with sticky objective markers, which have the plague bursts, and we have the stratagem, right? We have great screening to stop deep strikes on our home markers. I oftentimes use Nurglings like turn 2 or 3 to just hold the marker at home. And then screamers go forwards, sticky marker, die, I don't care, right? Because I will kill everything that could have reached that marker with my shooting. So I think those are the main components, right? I can choose where my OC goes. I prioritize killing the opponent's primary players, and I can screen really effectively and move block also the OC of my opponent effectively. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that description. I think it's really accurate in terms of your target priority. It really lines up with the way you play the game. It makes a lot of sense. You can move block the problem, so you have to, like the damage dealing problem. So you really want to just focus on the scoring, and then all of a sudden you're playing demons. You have these plague barriers and sticky objectives for primary control. Your OC is very precisely where it needs to be. You're probably beating them on secondaries because you're faster. You go up and down. You 3-inch away. You have more stuff. So it all kind of comes together very nicely. Do you find that you're like eking out close games pretty consistently, or is it like you're blowing people out, getting big scores, that kind of thing for team settings?
I'm playing a lot of teams as well, and going to play on Team Germany as well.
Oh, congratulations! I'll see you there.
Well,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
thanks. Yeah. Well, we'll see. We have a shifting team that changes for each of the big team tournaments. So, like this weekend, I'll play for Team Germany. There's a big European one, but then afterwards we'll see what factions are good. So maybe I'll play in August, maybe not. Hopefully,
Right.
though. But so teams is a big part for me as well. This list, in my opinion, always is a pretty close game finisher, because I always assume when I do these, when I do my matrix and everything, that the opponent does not make mistakes, that they play it optimally. And if they play it optimally, I also have to play kind of carefully, and I usually get a small victory because, as I said, I'm usually a little bit ahead in the secondaries. I should always be able to be at least even on primary, and if I go second, then maybe there's I can have an advantage on primary, so I oftentimes get small victories. But turns out oftentimes the opponent goes into the game with not a perfect game plan against my list, or they make a judgment call wrong throughout the game. And then when I can use such a mistake, I can have blowout games.
Right.
But
You can't assume
That
that, though,
is,
of course.
yeah, I can assume that, exactly. If my opponent plays perfectly, and I saw that at WCW, right? People just played really well, right? You played really well into this, and everyone played on such a high level. I had close victories most of the times. So it's definitely more like that.
Awesome. Well, Niklas, it's been a great chat, and I have one more question before we hop over to part 2 and we talk about your games. That's the super exciting part for me. If you had one piece of advice you could give to us, an aspiring Warhammer player, what would it be?
Just play the game. Just go to tournaments. Just play your lists. Don't listen too much to the meta or what other people say. Just find your playstyle. Do what's fun for you. Do what works for you. Stick with it. Don't be discouraged if it doesn't work immediately, and just keep going at it. And it's maybe you find that your crazy list or your crazy playstyle actually works out, and you're having success with it. And that's what is really fun for me. And I think this shows that you can't let anyone tell you how to play the game. Just do your thing.
I love it. That's very awesome advice and very applicable for so many people out there who might not have the courage to go explore their ideas because of what the internet said. Now the internet is telling you to go explore your ideas, so definitely do that. Niklas, it's been great chatting with you. I'm super excited to talk about your matchups over in part 2. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. And you can catch us on AOW.com or patreon.com/AOW40K. That's where part 2 of our conversation is going to be, along with 260 other part 2s. We're going to dig deep dive into Niklas's matchups, and you're going to learn exactly how he approached the specific situations he found himself in. This man has built an entire strategy based on playing situational Warhammer. We're going to figure out what that looks like. You don't want to miss this one. Niklas, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for talking with me, Nick. It's been an absolute pleasure, and excited for part 2.
Awesome. Listeners, we'll see you there.
Like what you just listened to? Check out Art of War Down Under and Art of War Unbroken on the competitive 40K network. TheArtofWar40K.com.